How GenAI challenges traditional thinking on supply chain talent. Well, joining us today to speak about that, Dana Stiffler, Distinguished Vice President Analyst at Gartner. Dana, it's great to see you again. Welcome.
Thank you, Russell.
Dana, I know that Gartner has recently done some really important research into generative AI, GenAI. I guess my question to you would be, well, why? What was the need for that? So answer that if you can, please.
The research that we'll be sharing at the conference this year is about the people implications associated with this latest wave of artificial intelligence or generative AI. What we noticed was that there was a lot of research being done on the technical aspects of the technology and the potential of it, but that perhaps in supply chain and operations organizations, we weren't paying enough attention to what the people implications of this new technology would be. And we've seen in previous waves of technology innovation that if we don't pay enough attention to some of those implications, we don't generally realize the benefits of some of these great new technologies. So those were the drivers of doing this research.
Interesting. Now, I would think that AI is top of mind clearly everywhere, not just in the industry, but just in society in general right now. And one of the things you see right there is an awful lot of misinformation about AI and assumptions and beliefs that may not necessarily accord with reality. My question to you is, within the supply chain world, what are the beliefs and assumptions about generative AI? What did you find?
Some fascinating stuff.
I bet.
So one thing that supply chain leaders say in our surveys is that they think that generative AI will allow them to really substitute for institutional knowledge, both formal and tacit. And so supply chain leaders tell us that they anticipate being able to cut a high amount of heads, even in the very near future, the next couple of years, because they think that generative AI will be the tool that allows them to do this. So this is number one. We think that, and we can talk a bit more about whether that assumption is the correct one or not.
Yeah, but we want to hear that.
We're really hoping, or leaders think, and some are even being, in a preliminary way, charged with exploring whether major headcount reduction will be possible through deploying generative AI. Another assumption that we're looking at is that supply chain leaders think that generative AI is mostly going to affect the office-based or desk-based roles, the white-collar roles within supply chain. That also may be a misplaced assumption. So that's number two. And then the third assumption is that, and this happens with most waves of new technology, is that upskilling is the answer, that by training people, we'll be able to get out in front of this, and that really all we need to do is hire people with these profiles, or we'll just upskill ourselves somehow magically, and we'll be able to realize these benefits. So those are three assumptions that we've explored in our research.
Well, but let's talk just a little bit about these assumptions. Are they either correct or incorrect, or is it don't know at this point? So what do you say?
Yes, so I think you knew that this was coming, but in outside research and in our research, we've shown that institutional knowledge right now cannot be replaced by generative AI. And so we still need people at different points in business processes, even when we're using generative AI, to make sure that the results are correct, right? So in all of our very good supply chain use cases that we have, there typically are steps along the way where some human creativity or a gut check or a fact check is important. And that's particularly important because I think you've seen also, Russell, that generative AI can be very convincing in showing you something that looks right, that looks correct, and it isn't. And so in both creating knowledge, it can't substitute for that today, and also in the validation or quality loop, we still need people. So that's one of the things that we're finding, and others are also. The other things that we're finding are that, I'll go to the third one for a moment. the upskilling piece. So what we are seeing in some of the early use cases is that upskilling on its own is not sufficient for being able to get all of the ROI that you want out of these technologies. What you also need to be doing is thinking about, with the time savings and the efficiencies associated with generative AI, what should your people be doing instead? So the upskilling isn't only about using generative AI or other artificial intelligence kinds of tools, but should this person be better at a human interaction skill, right? They spend more of their time maybe on strategic processes. What are those processes? So some of the early use cases are not just about the skills that need to be adopted, but what do people spend their time doing instead? And again, each wave of new technology innovation, you often hear people, supply chain leaders say, well, of course our people will spend their time on value-added activities because it's taking away some of the administrivia, right? We hope it's going to save us some time. But what are those activities? And do people know how to do them? So that's one of the considerations too.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, since it's coming, it's inevitable, then the question is risks associated with it, with these beliefs and with these assumptions. What are the issues that let's just delve a little further into the issues that we're likely to confront because of these beliefs and assumptions. So what do you say?
Yeah, so mostly we hope that people are experimenting in some form or fashion with generative AI already. What we would like to see people focusing more of their time on is that last piece that I mentioned, which is what should people be spending their time on instead, and are they equipped to do that? And how does that even have implications for how our supply chain organizations are designed and governed, right? Because if all of the jobs are changing, if more of your administrative tasks are being substituted for by this technology and other technologies, you'll be spending more of your time on complex exception handling. You'll be spending more of your time on transforming or improving the operation. You'll be spending more time, we would like to think, on innovating and creating new ways to do things better. But those are all things that we need to make sure that people are equipped to participate in those processes, that we've actually designed those processes, and that when you think about supply chain, which touches every part of a company, and those adjacencies with those functions, we need to think even more cross-functionally than a lot of high-performing supply chain organizations do today. So it's more about that kind of chatbot interface exposure that a lot of us have with GenAI today. So a bigger picture orientation and exploration seems to be in order.
But what I'm hearing is a big if. That if all of this administrivia, as you call it, is done away with by AI, then all of this other great stuff can be tended to. These other tasks can be handled and dealt with, etc. But that strikes me as a big if at this point. That's unproven, right?
That's right. No,
Right.
You're absolutely right. So that's what we think. One of the interesting results that I've seen in some operations is that people who've been around for a long time, maybe decades, doing these jobs, who have a lot of knowledge, right? They know how things work in the systems and outside the systems. They have a lot of that tacit knowledge, is that when their jobs change, they get nostalgic for the way things used to be, even if that's no longer the way that we do things. Kind of, moving from carriages to automobiles. People have nostalgia for the old ways, which are fundamentally different. And so some of the approaches that we've seen in some of the case studies account for that. So the idea that people may actually miss some of these administrivia types of tasks, because a lot of us have, if you have decades of expertise and a reputation, that's what you're known for. So what are you now known for? What gives you pride in your job, and what kind of contribution and impact do you make in this new world? And will your leadership support you in determining what that is and getting to that place?
Well, Dan, I want to thank you for this dose of realism in the sometimes heady conversations that we have about AI and what it's going to be contributing to supply chain. But thank you very much for meeting with us and talking about that today. Thanks.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's Dana Stiffler, Gartner, talking with us today about how generative AI is challenging traditional thinking about supply chain talent. Thanks for watching.